Hello and welcome to another episode of the Whole People Group podcast. At Whole People, we recognise that organisational excellence is deeply intertwined with the well-being of its people, and our mission is to seamlessly integrate well-being with performance because we understand that when individuals thrive, so does the entire organisation. Today, I am joined on episode 14 of the podcast by my incredible friend and co-founder, Nicki Murphy. I wouldn't even know where to begin, Nicki, in terms of introducing who you are to me and to us, other than to say that you are our co-founder and just the heart and soul behind our mission and vision. You've been totally life-changing for me and Jess and meeting you, and I just wanted to say that at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah, gonna start the podcast with a few tears.
I'm mindful, Nicki, because we haven't done our vision mission podcast around whole people, but in some ways I think it's appropriate that we speak about something really important today, and let's talk about the menopause. We have a menopause retreat coming up with you, Miriam Jordan Keane, and Michelle Heaton, and this is one of three podcasts I'm going to do, one with Mim and one with Michelle, just to talk about it, because the thing that's been actually astounding to me is how something so natural and normal is not seen as natural and normal. And if we bring our other co-founder, our dearly departed Rob in, Rob always taught us that in tribal cultures it was seen as this incredible rite of passage where everybody would be involved. In the last months in putting our retreat together, I can't believe how little people talk about it, how disconnected women feel who are going through it. So I'd love to talk to you more today about your experience through the menopause, some about our cultural attitudes towards it, and then maybe we can talk about the retreat and what women can expect when they come along.
Certainly. Well, to everybody out there, both women but also male allies, one thing I would like to say before I talk about the menopause is that, we women have a lot, I think, to cope with, periods, pregnancy, raising families, as well as perimenopause and menopause. And I think that, it is something that happens to 50% of the global population. But until the last couple of years, I think menopause is very much not in the spotlight. And it's quite tragic to me that so many women consider leaving or indeed do leave their jobs because having been very competent for a number of years in leadership positions within organisations, often women don't know what's happening to them when they get the menopause, and they can't remember things as clearly as they did previously. They get hot flushes and sweats. They can't sleep as well as they did, which leads to fatigue and this whole kind of cycle of what the hell's happening to me? Am I ill? I remember when I was first perimenopausal and I came to menopause. I'm 61 now, but I came to menopause very late. I didn't actually come into perimenopause until I was 54. And I'm now in menopause, but I'm not out the other side of it. And I remember having been very competent in business. I run a number of different businesses and have been, touching wood here, very successful at it for a number of years, not quite understanding why I couldn't remember people's names as much as I had previously done, which when you run an advertising agency group, which is one of my hats in London as I do, isn't great when you can't remember what the client's name is. I think what struck me most about perimenopause, apart from sleep problems, and I'm not a good sleeper anyway, was the fact that I, for the first time in my life, had panic attacks, and that had never happened to me previously. And I really didn't know what was happening. I can remember being in a restaurant with my last husband. I've had a few of those, and I'm sure the menopause contributed to the death of the second one. But anyway, never mind, not his death, the death of the marriage. He isn't dead. I mean, if thoughts could kill and all of that, but he's not. He's still alive. And I can remember being in a restaurant with him, and all of a sudden I just couldn't breathe. And I was looking at the menu, but I couldn't really see it properly, not because my eyes are so bad. Another thing exacerbated by menopause, ladies, but just because I was having a panic attack. I didn't know what it was. I'd never had one before. It was absolutely horrendous. And I remember going to the doctor and saying, look, I've put on a bit of weight. I'm knackered. I can't sleep. I'm sweating. What's wrong with me? And he said, oh, it's probably the menopause. And I said, what can I do about that? And he said, well, here's a website to go and go and look at. So even the National Health Service, I don't think in those days anyway, this was 6 or 7 years ago, didn't necessarily take it that seriously. And I have spoken to a lot of people, both women that work for me, but also female clients and friends who have had quite similar experiences, particularly if they have a male boss who hasn't had any experience of it with his partner, wife, girlfriend, whatever, not understanding what it is and not understanding that it's quite something to navigate. Everybody can see when you're pregnant and makes allowances for that. No one can really see unless you go red in the face and start sweating. I did that too, that you're suffering from the menopause. So it can be a really tricky time because it's almost a bit of a loss of identity, I think.
Yeah, I just spoke to Mim about that loss of identity and the loss of sort of like the faculties and things that enable you to become successful. We also spoke quite a lot about how hard it must have been to have become successful, and let's just call it right, a man's world, coming up through your 20s and 30s, and then not being able to really be weak or vulnerable and be able to say, look, I'm struggling, or look, this is happening to me, because you have to be so strong and on it all the time as a leader anyway, right? So it's very difficult just to be able to go, look, I'm struggling, or look, I'm going through this, because people's judgments are prevalent, to say the least, and they're long lasting. So the thing that's really surprised me is I've now spoken to quite a few women going through the menopause, and that there can be two women going through the menopause in the same building, but they don't talk to each other. It's like it feels to be this thing where it's very insular and very contained. And that almost strikes me as like the way men behave, right? Like two men can sit next to each other with depression and never tell each other. I've never really felt that way about women, but during the menopause, it just seems like no, there's a real reluctance to even talk to each other about it, and a real sense of this, like going through it on your own. I know you're more outgoing than quite a few people I know, but I wonder how many people just aren't telling anybody that they're going through it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a workplace structure, if you have a boss as a woman, if you have a boss who's not a woman, who might be younger or older than you, but if they haven't had experience of it, as I've said, then they don't really know how to navigate it. And to be perfectly honest, Simon, you don't know as a woman how to navigate it. And we do talk about it. My friends, some of my female colleagues, all the managing directors in my agency group are women of a certain age. We are all in perimenopause or menopause, and we do talk about it. But there are 48 symptoms of menopause, and not everybody has the same ones or to the same degree. And I also think it's a bit like pain. I mean, women's pain is not seen as much as men's pain, but it's not like having a broken arm, where everybody can see you've got a broken arm, or being pregnant. As I said, it's a very visible thing. When you've got the menopause, you don't look any different, you just feel very different. And some people have symptoms very severely and others don't. But I have known a number of very senior women check out of work, just literally not be able to work because their menopausal symptoms are so serious. I do think menopause is being better recognized now. There is an organization called Gen M which provides a kite mark for products that are efficacious for menopause, and that's great. And some supermarkets are having menopause aisles, much as they have here's the pasta aisle or whatever. So I do think it's becoming more common parlance and recognized, and I do therefore think that the health service particularly is taking more notice of it. But there aren't many support structures in a working environment, or indeed in a home environment, to support a woman going through menopause. I mean, I know my second husband said to me that when for a period of time, I was on some medication and I couldn't take my HRT, and he said it was like living with somebody completely different and not a great experience, because you get you're knackered, you can't sleep, you get grumpy, you're sweating, you're hot, you feel uncomfortable, you're forgetting things. I said to someone the other day, and you a friend who's just a bit younger than me and just started perimenopause, and I said, have you done that thing that I used to do all the time? And she was like, what's that? And I was like, I used to walk into a room and for something and then get in there and think, shit, what did I come in here for? And then leave the room and then go, oh yeah, I went in there for that, go back in and forget again. I used to do things like put my car keys in the fridge. I'm like, where are my car keys? I just had them in my hand. I once spent 10 minutes looking for my mobile phone with my mobile phone torch battery. And you know that I've got a doctorate and an MBA. I'm not unintelligent, and yet I was doing really mad, forgetful things that made me think, Christ, have I got a brain tumor? No, fortunately, thank goodness. It was a menopausal symptom, and it actually, people don't talk about it. It's quite scary.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think too is that you are, people talk about ageism and how acceptable it is for men to age, but for women, the loss of kind of sexuality, if you like, which you've got when you can have a baby, you can give that to a man, to yourself, but once you've gone through menopause, you kind of, a bit dried up and barren, and it's over. And therefore I know some women who kind of question their femininity, if you want. So it's actually quite it's quite a visceral, personal thing, and I therefore think that might be why some people don't talk about it, because it is a bit of a rite of passage. That somebody said to me the other day, "Oh, if you feel like that, perhaps you're pregnant." Ha ha ha. And I said, that ship has sailed. Ha ha ha. But actually it's not. It's not funny in that sense. It is quite, a part of your definition of yourself as a woman being able to have a baby is gone.
Yeah. Our co-founder Rob, he spoke about this quite a lot, of being like a rite of passage, and it being, but it was the one thing that Rob always reminded us, and in some ways this is what Whole People was all about, that it wasn't even an issue, right? But it affected everybody. So Jess is probably perimenopausal. A lot of my male clients are going through extraordinary struggles personally, and they've got a menopausal wife at home and they don't know how to support her, and they've got kids. One of my clients' wife is a QC, a really high powered judge, and she's forgetting things while in the middle of, that's her life. So she's going through that identity change while he's going through a midlife crisis, while their kids are 11, and you think it's not just it affects everybody. And I've got many hats while I'm here. I feel like, where's my education been in terms of how to hold space for Jess over the next 10 years? I'm getting it now. There's a men's coach that I really admire and respect. He talks specifically to men about how to support their wives, and it's not about you. The whole thing is, it's not about you. Unfortunately, I know men who have got rid of their wives during menopause for a younger model. That's a thing I've heard twice, right? And then I'm meant to continue coaching them in the same light. It's quite difficult as a man to really know what this is all about, because these conversations, maybe they happen more and more in the workplace, but it just doesn't feel like it's a women's thing. And I want to ask you a question specifically, you as someone as a business owner, because I think right now, okay, we've got women watching the podcast, and it's great. They feel seen and heard, and that they're not alone going through this. But I think, what about the male, logically minded, performance only, bottom line thinking CEO who suddenly has women in his team who aren't performing? They exist, right? Unfortunately, women are still led by men who still see people like that. And I wonder, how does an enlightened or an open-minded business owner treat this with regards to profit and performance of the company? How do they take something which on the surface reduces people's faculties down? I'm still using their language. And how do you run a company if you've got previous, how do you run a company if your QC is forgetting where she is in the middle of a courtroom? I mean, how do you facilitate that movement forwards and stay loyal to your teams? And is it just getting people in to come and help? Is it creating spaces where they can talk about it?
I think most organizations don't confront it, and I think women often don't feel they have the voice to talk about it, whether that's an embarrassment thing or a shit, I don't want to get the sack thing, so I can't tell my boss that I'm struggling. I mean, I'll give you for example. We had a much beloved colleague at my primary agency, River, who during COVID, he was a 38-year-old man at the time, he contracted cancer. of a very serious type, and he couldn't work in the same way because he was having chemo and radiotherapy, and he was very poorly for a lot of the time, as he had previously done. So we had two choices as a business. We support him, brackets, kick him out, or we give him someone that works alongside him while he's ill. And that's what we did. And okay, it's an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur, it's my business, I can do that because it's my money. A lot of organizations probably wouldn't do that, but it was absolutely the right thing for Anthony. That was him. He's now sadly passed away. For his family, you know, and when he couldn't work anymore, we carried on paying him. Of course we did. And we then set up a fund for his daughter. Anyway, I'm not saying that to sound like Mother Teresa. I'm saying it like, you know, he had a lot of experience. He was great at his job. He was on the commercial side. His clients loved him, but it was also the right thing to do. If somebody gets a serious illness, organizations don't chuck them out. Or they shouldn't. Sometimes they do, and therein lies in IT. Or when they get pregnant, women shouldn't be chucked out. Sometimes they are overlooked. It's the same thing. Menopause affects some people as if it were an illness, and those people deserve the respect of the organisation. Now, of course, if the person is not able to properly do their job, and that is a disbenefit to the business, then it's up to the business to manage, you know, that person such that they get the help and support that they need, but while filling the gap, which is exactly what we did with Ant when he got poorly. We gave two people one person's job, if you like.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I think that's a really good idea, and I think this comes back to what we're doing with Whole People, which is, you know, when you, because I imagine the knock-on effect of supporting Anthony for your culture at River, for other people to see the way that River supports people has to be a cultural plus, right? So there's the part of, for the leader who's like, okay, let's support our women go through the menopause, and maybe we need to facilitate and help them out. But there's also for the other people to become a part of a culture that takes care of its people and that understands that natural passages through life, like childbirth, but also, you know, I wonder sometimes whether things like depression are just natural. We're meant to get depression, and it's part of our moral responsibility as leaders to take care of our people as best we can. Yeah, I think there's a huge, maybe it's changing. Maybe since COVID, people are caring more.
I mean, I think it's a tardy organisation that doesn't. It's not like everybody is going to get cancer. A lot of people sadly do, but every woman of a certain age is going to. It's like death and taxes. You are going to become perimenopausal and menopausal. That is going to happen, and the focus on menopause, both women talking about it more and some enlightened organisations recognising it, products, the kite mark that I discussed, or, you know, retailers seeing that they can sell these products to menopausal women, who actually are the richest consumer outside of male billionaires and female billionaires. You know, it's a market that organizations, retail businesses, product owners and manufacturers should not ignore. And there are a lot of ways that menopause symptoms can be, if not expunged, can certainly be alleviated, which is one of the things we'll be talking about on our menopause retreat that you referenced at the top of the podcast, and we will be giving everybody that attends a goodie bag of some of these vitamins, etc., to take away and try, because there are, you know, we don't have, I think in the past, I can remember my mum and my nana's generation, you know, it was just the way it was and you had to get on with it, and I now think that people understand holistic health and self-care much more than they did. And even though we Brits have a stiff upper lip and we just keep going, you know, it's a bit like when you've got a headache. You'd be a bit daft if you didn't take a paracetamol. So why don't you use some of these products to alleviate your symptoms? And organisations should, just like we put sanitary towels in the women's toilet, you know, potentially organisations should provide you know, help and support that is mental but is also potentially physical or supplemental, and I think it will come. It's definitely not here yet, but I do think it will come.
Yeah, it feels like it's coming. So on to the retreat. I mean, we have this retreat upcoming with yourself, Miriam Jordan Keane and Michelle Heaton. under the banner of Whole People Group, right? And what we're all about is creating safe spaces where people can come and share their lived experience. We're a lived experience brand. That's what we do. And, you know, my feeling, I'm a 40-year-old man, is I just think what an opportunity for women to come together in a safe place where they're not going to be judged. They're going to be met with that lived experience, which is what all of our products offer people. But maybe you could just tell the listener a little bit more about what to expect and what sort of energy you're trying to create with this kind of flagship event, really. I mean, I don't see many menopause retreats around. Maybe they will be, and maybe this is the beginning of something, but it feels like something quite groundbreaking and very important.
Yeah, I mean, I've not seen one, so hopefully we've stepped into a new market. So Miriam Mim is the ex-global brand director for Weight Watchers, and she also is a charity patron and trustee. I run a number of different businesses in lots of different verticals, but I'm a marketing strategist and entrepreneur at heart. And Michelle Heaton is ex-Liberty X and ex-pop singer. Miriam has gone through the menopause. She's out the other side. She's 64, I believe. I'm 61. I'm still in it. Suffering women, I hear you, see you. And Michelle is really interesting. She's younger, but she actually went into early menopause, which is even more scary, I think, because it's totally unexpected. So we will be talking about the tips and tricks, the products, etc., that we are in those 3 different stages of perimenopause and menopause that we have used and continue to use that have been helpful. And also, I hope, allowing the space where people can talk about their experiences in a kind of, you know, cheese and wine environment, although there won't be cheese and wine, there'll be much nicer food than that, I'm sure. But I think being able for women to come along in a series of, in a workshop environment throughout the day with activities that are fun but educational, we'll be learning how to mitigate, learning what the 48 symptoms are and how to recognize them, and what help to ask for, either from the doctor, from their partner, from their children, from their friends and family, from their workplace, but also to share their own experience and hear from other people. Because I think, you know, we trust what other people tell us much more than we trust, you know, anyone else, really, particularly the media and the government at the moment. So I think it's a kind of a sharing environment, but it will be hopefully a hopeful space. You know, you're not in it on your own, and there are ways to mitigate some if not all of your symptoms, but also hearing other people's shared experiences, and making the beginnings of what I hope becomes, as we do more of them, a bit of a community where women can come together in some kind of WhatsApp or community group and talk after the retreat about, you know, new symptoms that they're experiencing, and get advice from members of that community as to how they might alleviate them. So I'm hoping we're setting up a bit of a, it's not an isolated thing. It will become a bit more of a movement, because, you know, you can be in perimenopause and menopause for 15 years. And when you consider the average age of a woman is 78, that's quite a big proportion of your life. Yeah. Particularly if you're struggling in that period of time, not just at work, as I said, but also at home. And you don't understand why you're cranky. In my case, I didn't know I was cranky until my ex-husband said, "You're a nightmare." So.
Well, I think also the opportunity to be with the 3 of you, for some women, it's going to be, you know, a bit what Whole People's been built upon, about the fact that all 3 of you exist at a level of leadership and a level of performance, and you are expected to show up in the world and be patrons and pop stars and entrepreneurs and leaders while you're going through this. It's a really, there's a lot of navigation there, and I think that's the lived experience which we're all about as Whole People. It's how do you keep sustaining some level of normalcy and performance in these positions of leadership and being in charge of people.
Yeah, and I think it's also important for employers to know that, you know, they don't have to put people out to grass when they're at a certain age, because there's a real experience economy. You know, the queen ages, it's been dubbed in the media. You know, don't just chuck out women in their late 40s, 50s, early 60s in my case, who are past their best, because they're definitely not past
No.
their best. And the best organisations, certainly looking at my 9 or 10 businesses, are the ones where there are people of all different ages, so that everybody learns from everybody else and you get lots of different perspectives. And I think it's a real shame to tar everybody with the same brush. But the thing that I would come back to is, I don't think what's talked about enough is the real loss of identity. You know, feeling less of a woman because you are now post menopausal is something that menopause is talked about quite a lot now, but it's not talked, that bit of it isn't talked about. And I do think that that's something that we'll be focusing on in the retreat, and that really does need more general media attention, actually.
Brilliant. And if anyone listening to this right now is going through the menopause, they can't come to the retreat, but they're listening to this podcast and they're feeling like they're going through it, what's your advice to a woman who's going through it right now?
Sorry, Simon, I interrupted you. I would say contact us, because we've got a lot of knowledge about menopause, and we will be running retreats and potentially running some online webinar type events that people can tap into, even if they can't come to a physical event, to be listened to be held space for, if you like, but also to share their experiences and understand how other people who are going through a similar stage or have already gone through it have navigated it. So it's about products and services that you can use. It's about advice and knowledge that other people can give you, but it's also a contribution of your experience and sharing that with other people. You know, the most successful societies in the future of the world have been those that are led by women, and you know, I'm a big passionate believer in that, and menopause is a big part of being a woman.
And I think also the fact that it's not just you, Michelle, and Mim in our team, right? We've got 70% women, and I would say probably 70% of that's, well, actually most of the women in our team are peri or during or post menopause. So we have quite a lot of lived experience in that sense. And just to bring it back to Rob, I mean, Rob, we were built on the map of the tribal culture. Rob always said we're the elder that our culture needs, and the tribes were always run by the women. And Rob said, you never go through anything alone. No, and then you don't go in the tribal cultures, you never went through anything alone. It just was, you weren't ever left alone to go through anything. If it was childbirth, depression, addiction, whatever it was, you were surrounded by people. And that's been our vision in putting this together. We need to have lots more podcasts, because I feel like we can talk about lots of things. And it's been really, really, I mean, I just learned so much from these conversations. So I just want to say thank you personally. Yeah, looking forward to hearing how the retreat goes. I said to Mim, I'm not quite at the stage where I wish I was a menopausal woman, but I did say there's something about I wish I was a fly on the wall. I said I'm not quite there where I wish I was a menopausal woman, but I think what we're putting together is really special.
Well, me too. And please, ladies, if you're watching, or gents or CEOs, men and women who want to send their menopausal or perimenopausal people on the retreat, please do. We'll give you a nice discount if you book more than one place. Thank you, Simon. Good to see you.
Bye.